This only makes sense this way.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, the guy couldn't handle my confrontation, even though it wasn't in his face. All I wanted him to do was discuss with me how electromagnetic energy interacts with matter, because he doesn't have clue one as to how it interacts. And
well, I don't have the indoctrination that you have, George, and I don't have the math indoctrination that you studied and you teach about. But as far as RF energy bouncing off of a hard surface, I can actually use my own common sense and come to a better conclusion than you have. And so why don't we just go into that right now here. I drew up some diagrams here. And as a general rule of thumb, lower frequency wavelengths will reflect better off of smooth, hard surfaces. Higher frequency wavelengths will either get absorbed or actually transmit through. And that's what we have with the ionosphere. That's why lower frequency wavelengths are going to bounce off, whether it be the skywave or low-RAN signals. They're going to bounce off the glass firmament at the top of the sky at 100 kilometers high. I drew these diagrams here to help you understand what's really going on as far as like the skywave bounce. Why it makes much more sense. Let me see if you're getting the whole screen here. Why it makes much more sense that we're living inside a concave sphere and there's actually a glass and ice firmament at the top of the sky, because it's a smooth surface. It's also a convex surface at the top of the sky, so it's actually going to reflect at a greater distance, and it's going to be a specular reflection, coherent wavelengths, as opposed to incoherent. So you're not going to get much signal loss when it's a smooth, hard surface. It's going to come back down to, whether it's land or ocean, that's going to be more of an irregular surface, even if it is the ocean with the waves or ground. And so it's going to bounce back with a shorter distance of reflection, and it's also going to be diffuse and incoherent. It's going to be more scattering, but it's going to come back again, and it's going to hit the glass again, which is again a convex smooth surface, and it's going to generate a greater distance as well. So that's how we get the skip pattern going across to the other side of the Earth, inside the Earth. And obviously it's going to work better at nighttime when the sunlight is not interfering with the RF frequency. So if you were on a convex ball and there was no hard surface to the atmosphere, it would just be a plasmic, undefined area of electrons. You wouldn't have that surface, that smooth surface, to bounce coherent, specular waves. It would be incoherent. It would scatter. This is also why, like, here, I can pull up this one right here. Plasma stealth. Plasma stealth. You know what that is, George? Let me get a better screenshot of that. Plasma stealth. Technology is what can be called active stealth technology in scientific terms. This technology was first developed by the Russians. It's a milestone in the field of stealth technology. Technology behind this, not at all new. Plasma stealth, the aircraft injects a stream of plasma in front of the aircraft. The plasma will cover the entire body of the fighter and will absorb most of the electromagnetic energy of the radar waves, thus making the aircraft difficult to detect. So if you don't have a hard surface to the ionosphere and it's just a field of plasma, those RF frequency, those RF waves are going to just be absorbed. And that's what we have in your model. It doesn't make sense. You need a hard surface. See, this is your false convex Earth model. If you didn't have a hard surface to the ionosphere, for one thing, it would be, you'd have this undefined concave surface to the sky, so there'd be a shorter distance of reflection. It would be more diffuse and incoherent. It would be more scatter. coming back down to the ground. You'd also have an irregular convex surface on a convex Earth. It would theoretically it would bounce a little bit farther than a concave surface, but there would still be more scattering and it would be more diffused. So the signal would be canceled out. It would soon be absorbed. There's no way you'd be able to reflect a radio signal all the way around a convex Earth without a hard surface to the sky, a hard, smooth surface to the sky. And so that's what you fail to realize, heliocentrists. It's just indoctrination. And see what they have. What they'll tell you is that there's different levels to the ionosphere. There's the E layer, the sporadic E layer, the F layer, the D layer, the F1, F2. And that's not the case. There's only one layer at 100 kilometers. Actually, there's higher glasses way up toward the center of the Earth over here. But as far as the RF waves and the ionosphere are concerned, it's really just hitting one hard surface. It's a glass ice firmament, and that's where the micrometeors are coming from. That's where the tektites are coming from. That's why meteorites are covered with fusion crust. Fusion crust is burnt glass. And so with these different frequencies of RF signal, this is a little graph they will show you. This is the E layer. They call it the sporadic E layer. It's at 100 kilometers. Remember I talked about where Sigrid, I forget her last name, she's an astrophysicist. I think she works for NASA, but she compared the sporadic meteoroids hitting the sporadic E layer at 100 kilometers like bugs off of a windshield. She's indicating to you that it's a hard surface. And so we have this E layer that they will call it, and then they say there's an F layer, F2 layer, or F3 layer, whatever they want to say. Those are simply hitting the glass sky at higher frequencies, and so they're either being absorbed more or they're actually transmitting through. The higher the frequency, the greater the transmission through a hard surface. So that's what's happening. This is why these lower frequencies are going to reflect back. You're not going to get much signal attenuation when it comes back. But these higher frequencies, they're going to either transmit through the glass or they're going to be absorbed into the glass, and there's not going to be as much of a return signal, if any. And so it's very simple to understand this, ladies and gentlemen. It does not work.
Reflection
of radio waves off the ionosphere will not work unless there is a hard surface, period. This is what Wiki will tell you. Ionograms show the virtual heights and critical frequencies of the ionospheric layers, which are measured by an ionosonde. An ionosonde sweeps a range of frequencies, usually from 0.1 to 30 megahertz, transmitting at vertical incidence to the ionosphere. As the frequency increases, each wave is refracted less by the ionization in the layer, and so each penetrates further before it is reflected. Eventually, a frequency is reached that enables the wave to penetrate the layer without it being reflected. Total transmission. Higher, extremely high frequencies will just transmit right through the glass. But instead of, they're under the faulty presupposition that there is no hard surface to the atmosphere, therefore they have to give you different layers of it. And that's dependent upon the frequency. See, the lower frequency is going to reflect, but this is a false convex Earth model. So that's what they're failing to tell you. It's just a faulty presupposition. Here's another graph. The level of absorbance is greater when the wavelength is shorter. In other words, when it's higher frequency, it's going to be higher absorbent. I mentioned this graph before. This is a ham radio wave, a horizontal ham radio antenna wave, where the energy is always going to be rising upward. You have these different lobes, but it's never going straight across and it's never going downward. Radio frequency, radio energy is always rising up. I made this graph before. A skip wave has a hard, smooth surface. It's a specular reflection, as opposed to a diffuse reflection. It only works because there's a hard surface to the ionosphere. There was a man named Robert Watson Watt, who was a Scottish pioneer of radar technology. He was actually, I think it was World War II, World War II, where they were concerned about the Germans attacking England, and he had to hurry up and develop some kind of technology where he could pick up the incoming radar of the German airplanes. And so in this movie here, it's called Castles in the Sky, they give you some innuendos that there's actually a glass surface to the ionosphere. I'm just going to play part of that here. Can't play the music. Copyright strike if I do. Hard surface. Ping pong ball against a hard surface. Then he comes to the realization that he can bounce a signal off of the hard surface in the sky, the ionosphere. Glass. Electrons will ionize when UV light hits glass. That's why they call it an ionosphere. And there are definitely not multiple layers of this plasma field. It's definitely a hard surface layer. So many indications. I don't have to reiterate them. You can just watch them. I'll put some links in the description box. But that's what's going on. So going back to George here, George, you just simply need to look at the evidence and use common sense and realize that you're in an indoctrination system of heliocentric cultism. It's not true. And as far as my personal character is concerned, I would actually question yours. You don't have any tact. You don't have any sensitivity. Barbie was in a state of distress, and she needed comfort. But you just wanted to come on and push your agenda. And so that's where I see you obviously have some character flaws. And yeah, I blew up at you, but I believe it was deservedly so, because it was inappropriate for you to come on. You even claimed here that you don't initiate things unless you're like asked to, but obviously you're being a hypocrite there too as well. So that's why we have a hard surface to the sky, to the atmosphere. There's glass, and there's ice attached to the glass, and you're living inside the concave sphere of the Earth.